Hi and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here, and today I'm showing you how I paint this winter snow scene where the sunset is reflected in the snow. The trees are really simple and I'm using a limited palette and simplifying a photograph using my artistic license to change it to make a really interesting painting from the photograph. Today I'm going to be painting another beautiful wintry snow scene, this time inspired by this lovely photograph that I found on Pixabay. The link to the photograph will be in the description below. I'm going to use my artistic license to make some changes. I'm going to warm up the snow and add some of this sort of sunset glow, and I don't want an obvious sun in the sky either. So let's start, and I'm using Saunders Waterford 100% cotton cold press paper. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape, and my board's at an angle of about 45 degrees. I'm going to try and paint it very loosely and very simply and just use a limited palette of raw and burnt sienna, indigo, Paynes grey and sepia. There will be a full real-time tutorial including a detailed lesson on the sketch of the painting here over on Patreon. So if you think that will be for you, then please follow the link below. I've thoroughly wet the sky area with my extra large Pro Art Ranson Hake brush, and I've wet a bit of the ground. I don't want all of the ground wet, I want some soft and hard edges to appear, but I want the sky to be nicely diffused, so that's the reason for wetting the sky and only partially wetting the land. Now this is my sky mixture, which is I've picked up both raw and burnt sienna on my brush at the same time. I'm just going to allow the colours to mix on the page using mostly horizontal strokes, picking up a little bit more of that burnt sienna to get a bit more of a glow in the sky, because as you know, watercolour will dry back much paler, so I don't want this to dry back to nothing. And now you can see, now that most of the paint has come off my brush and into the sky, I'm pulling across some of this very pale, whatever's left on the brush, just across parts of the foreground, just to kind of indicate some light from the sky reflected on the snow. But I want to keep quite a bit of unpainted paper simply there, just to represent this kind of snowy field. While everything's still wet, I want to put in some distant trees. I want some slightly stronger, dark distant trees on the left, excuse me, just in the midground. So I'm using my medium Pro Art Ranson Hake brush and indigo with a little bit of Paynes grey to just rough in some very, very loose trees. And you could see that I cleaned out my brush mostly, picked up a bit of paint, and then used a cloth to remove most of the water so that I can have a pale mixture, but it's not too watery. If it's more watery or wetter than my damp paper, I'll get runbacks, and I don't really want them there. I just want pale paint. And then clean damp brush, quickly running along to straighten up that tree line. You can see it's diffusing nicely into the sky, and now I've gone back in with some richer, drier paint, almost tube consistency, but mixed with a little bit of water, so I can build up this nice bank of distant trees on the right. I want to keep this main tree lighter, so I tried with the Hake brush, it didn't quite work, so I'm using a clean damp flat brush to lift out some of the blue from the outline of my tree branches there, so I can keep them paler, and that'll be easier for me then to work on the detail of this slightly paler tree against the indigo background trees. Now going in with some richer paint around the bottom, around the base of the trees for some shadows. This is my small calligraphy brush. I think it's known as a rat liner brush. And I'm pulling some horizontal lines across below the trees for kind of indications of shadows, distant sort of field boundaries, and then I can get some trunks in as well. Just hints and clues to sort of help the eye, to suggest to the viewer what's happening in the background. You can see how varying the tone here is starting to bring those those areas of trees to life. Again, with the calligraphy brush, drawing these horizontal lines below and then adding in some tree trunks just to give a little bit of shape and form to the distance. Varying the shape of the trunks, the thicknesses there, and the sort of how close or distant they are from each other. And now to get a few sort of snowy branches in, I'm using the corner of a plastic store card and I'm pulling it through this rich paint and lifting out or etching through and creating some sort of paler trunks and branches to just kind of suggest the snow heaped up on a few of the branches of the trees and just of the light catching the branches and the trunks. The same over on this side, being careful not to overdo this, but just enough to bring the painting together across the distance. Again, just darkening up a tiny bit here and there with the edges of the Hake brush, or the tips rather. And a few touches of indigo in the foreground just to indicate maybe some footprints or some shadows in the snow. And that's it for this stage. I'm going to leave it to dry completely. It's now completely dry and everything's lovely and soft apart from some of these sort of slightly harder lines and marks that create the trunks and the shadows of the trees. Just need to strengthen a few of those up a little bit more. And now I'm going to start from the left side, working on the trees that are coming out of the foreground bank of snow. This is Paynes grey here, mostly. For the other trees and shrubs, I shall mix in some sepia and some indigo, but I want these winter twigs that grow out of the bank to be really sort of quite stark and very dark, completely bare of leaves. I'm roughly following the design that I penciled in earlier, but I'm not sort of sticking to it religiously. I'm just going with the flow of the brush. I usually start twigs and trees like this off at the base where it grows from the ground, and then I can use the whole of the brush and pull it upwards, gradually taking the pressure off and moving the brush around a little bit to give me some sort of slight variation in the line, and then to make sure that the line becomes thinner as the twigs become slimmer and taper off towards the ends, and then I can add more twigs towards the ends just to fill them out a little bit with the finer new growth. Now in the middle here I'm using sepia mostly just to put on, and using some dry brush with the calligraphy brush here, as well as full painted strokes to indicate these kind of shrubby plants here with their kind of seed heads that's still left over from autumn. Just using the tip of the brush to paint in these little dots and dashes that kind of indicate just a few of these remaining seed heads still clinging to the dry stems. And now on to the main event, the main tree, which I sort of have in my mind is a kind of birch type tree, as it is in the photograph, but I'm not going to be sort of too strict about keeping too much white for the silver birch. I just want to make sure I get some variation in the bark textures and colours, so I'm swapping between indigo, Paynes grey and sepia, using again my fine calligraphy brush or rat liner, and I'm dabbing off with a tissue if it needs it, if I find I've got slightly darker areas than I want, or if I just want to lift out a little bit of lighter sort of silvery bark. And pulling out these lovely branches, you can see where I lifted out the branch against the distant trees. You can see how effectively they show up. So I don't want to lose all of that. I have to darken those up a little bit just to get those branches defined, but I want to keep a bit of that light and that kind of sort of 3D-ness, because this tree is my focal point. So I want it to really pop and to be sort of nice and elegant as well. It's just a fairly young, slim tree. Tangle of branches towards the top, but not many at the bottom. I think we'll pull a few twigs and sticks at the base, pull them out through the snow, but focusing on these branches. I am being guided by my drawing again, but I'm not minding if I don't slavishly copy the pencil marks. At the end of the painting, if you're left with some pencil marks, you can always carefully erase them. I don't mind. I quite like seeing the pencil construction marks in the finished painting. It's part of the process as far as I'm concerned, and I really like the look of pencil marks being left. Occasionally they don't work, so I will erase them. But here they just kind of almost add to the tangle of branches in a sort of subtle way. And just a few more very fine sticks and twigs around the base of this tree just to balance up the composition. And I think I'm nearly finished. So time to carefully remove the masking tape, peeling it away from the painting so that if it was to tear, it won't tear the painting itself. And once the tape is removed, it smartens up the edges and makes the painting look far more finished and gives you an idea of how it will look when it's in a mount and a frame. And I'm reasonably pleased with that. I think I've achieved what I wanted to, which is that kind of evening glow in the sky, reflected a little bit on the snow, but keeping plenty of white unpainted paper for the snow too. And some nice texture on the birch tree. I'm just going to dab that little drop of paint off of the branch there just to make sure it doesn't run down. And I'm really happy with that. I think it would make a lovely Christmas card. I think it's a really fun and quite simple painting, so I hope you'll give it a try and let me know how you get on. Thanks so much for watching, And please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to my lovely Patreon group who support this channel. I'll see you soon and happy painting. Bye.